Have you ever lost a friend? A friend that you irrationally thought would just always be around? Somehow, I thought Justice David Prosser would just be in this Capitol building forever. Serve with me on the Uniform Law Commission forever. Stop in my office to share ideas and talk politics just as long as I was here. In hindsight, I'm so thankful to have known him. David Prosser had an impressive career. Everyone that knows him knows that's true. He was Outagamie County's district attorney, and then in 1978, for 17 years, he was in this assembly representing Appleton and served as a former speaker and minority leader. But one project he was on was Miller Park. He was so important in working on Miller Park and making it actually happen for Milwaukee and for the state that another Fox Valley State representative named David Hutchinson, who served with David Prosser in the 1990s, said that they should have called that park Prosser Park. His support for Miller Park was actually used against him when he ran for the House of Representatives in 1996. They claimed Prosser worked so hard on that project that he was worried about Milwaukee first and not Northeast Wisconsin, which was ridiculous. After his 1996 attempt at the House, he applied for the appointment by Tommy Thompson for our Supreme Court. When he sought that appointment, he received 77 letters from state representatives, both Democrats and Republicans, asking Governor Thompson to appoint him. And he served nobly in the Supreme Court for 18 years. But David was so much more than just an impressive career. His goals were always more noble than himself. When asked about his career, he never wanted to talk about this stuff. He didn't want to talk about his accomplishments. He was just humble. He said once in a state bar interview that he did that his favorite compliment he ever received was from some lawyers at Marquette University's law school dedication. Those lawyers told him how surprised they were in him as being a Supreme Court justice. As a former Republican speaker, they thought he'd be the easiest to predict. But statistically, he was the most difficult to predict of all the decision makers in the Supreme Court. I think Justice Prosser really appreciated that because he didn't want to be labeled as just a former Republican speaker that's now in the Supreme Court, and it's just obvious what he's going to decide. And those Marquette University Law School experts could kind of prove that he had done a good job being non-biased in his decisions. But I think it's really telling what kind of a man he was based on what he said his biggest regret was. He said his biggest regret in that same article was that he couldn't keep his colleagues in the Supreme Court to remain friends. He couldn't get them to keep coming out for lunch just once a month, to have polite conversations and talk about their lives outside of the court. That regret showed how he saw the world. It wasn't about bills passed. He didn't have regrets or bragging rights over votes that he made or decisions or things that had gone well or things he wished he had done differently. His regret was about people. It was about his wish that those conservative and liberal justices could just have a more friendly relationship. Well, he was such a good friend to me. It was such a comfort for me to know that the smartest, most accomplished man I've ever met would just take my phone call whenever I wanted to call him up. I could talk to him about anything, whether it was sports or a bill or my career or anything, and he'd pick up that phone and he'd just talk about it. I really admire that about him. He really was a great mentor to me and great mentor to a lot of other state representatives and other lawyers. There was another article that mentioned that one time he was asked to draft a letter of support for another attorney. And the other attorney said, I'm kind of needing in a hurry, can you do it fast? And Justice Prosser kind of nonchalantly said, well, we'll see. Well, he wrote the letter immediately and then drove it 2 hours to hand that letter to that attorney, just so that attorney would get it as soon as physically possible. So same day, within just hours of asking, he had that letter. And it just kind of showed how much that meant to him. That was the David Prosser I knew. You know, he wanted to be remembered as an independent thinker. He will be. He wanted to make Wisconsin a better place for everyone. And I think he really obviously, from any partisan perspective or the Supreme Court perspective, he really did make Wisconsin a better state. If you ever wonder about that, read how much thought he put into his decisions, and especially his dissents. And I think David wanted to be remembered as your friend and my friend, and a friend to the state, you know, not just the state, but the people working in this building, to us state representatives. So I hope we'll remember him that way, as someone who had a lot of love for us, and I hope today we can show a little bit of love toward him.